Hello, welcome back to Recap Time. Today we'll talk to you about a 2018 science fiction movie called A Breath Away. So we'll set ourselves in this city and discover the mysterious appearance of a fog that ends the lives of those it reaches. Well, let's begin. The movie starts with a dream. It shows an ultrasound, then a newborn baby, and a girl running in an open field. Suddenly, we can see the protagonist named Matthew, waking up from this dream on a plane currently in the process of landing in France. Upon leaving the airport, he calls his 12-year-old daughter, Sarah, to check on her and tell her he'll be arriving soon. After a quick drive on the highway, he arrives at his apartment where he receives a call from Sarah through the walkie-talkie. She asks when he'll be arriving at her mother's house. After taking our box out of his bag, he leaves his apartment and crosses the street to enter a different building, and then he meets one of the neighbors, Mr. Belkism, who is also about to enter the building. Matthew helps him with his oxygen tank and then quickly climbs the stairs and knocks on his wife's door, and she greets him with a kiss and says she's in the middle of an online call. So while he waits, he goes to see his daughter in another room. Sarah, his daughter, lives in a sealed capsule but filters her air due to an allergic autoimmune syndrome. After saying hello and asking about the boy she likes, she gives him the box she brought as a gift. He opens it and finds natural scents from Toba, which is strange because supposedly her dad went to Marseille. Matthew asks her to look under the bottles, and when she does, she finds an SD card, which she quickly puts into a virtual reality helmet. Matthew recorded a Rocky Mountain landscape for her. Then, we see Anne, who was about to enter the call. Matthew goes to talk to her and then tells her that he didn't go to Marseille for an interview. He went to Toba because a new treatment has been discovered and there may be space for Sarah, and is skeptical as she never heard of this from her doctor. Matthew explains that this is new and has not yet been published. They'll just need to move to Canada but are not satisfied. She thinks Matthew is complicating things. She mentions that she's lucky to have gotten Sarah out of the hospital and having a life, but Matthew doesn't believe it's a life. Meanwhile, Sarah has a video call with some friends who have the same condition as she does, including a girl named Charlotte and the boy she likes, No, who refers to their small group as colored fish in a tank since the three are completely isolated. Returning to Matthew and Anna, they are still discussing this new treatment. Martin wants Anna to think about it. Anna says they can go, but only when there are real results. Nevertheless, Matthew continues to insist he wants these doctors to take Sarah out of the capsule so she can finally embrace him. But Anna asks for more time, so Matthew leaves the apartment and goes back to his own. Meanwhile, Sarah continues to chat with her friends. The TV shows important news and earthquakes of a magnitude never seen before isolated Sweden and Denmark. Matthew hears this from the shower, and that's when an earthquake hits Paris. Also, the lights go out in the city and Sarah's capsule switches to battery mode. She calls her dad on the walkie-talkie and rushes to get dressed to go outside and see what's happening. Matthew tells Anna it will end soon. When he goes out on the street, he hears many car alarms and sees people running on the streets. Sarah tries to get in touch again. He tells her and her mother to stay still. They walk down the street, and after noticing a flock of birds flying desperately, they finally find the problem. There is a thick mist coming out of the ground and killing anyone who breathes it. It's spreading all over the city, so Matthew immediately starts running back with his family. Once inside, he finds Anna next to the window, but he quickly pulls her away, telling her not to breathe the mist. He tells Sarah that she will have to stay in her capsule. He promises they will come back for her soon. A mist also makes its way into the building. Matthew and Anna run down the stairs until they reach the highest apartment where a couple of old people, Lucien and Colette, live. Lucien lets them in and Matthew runs to the window to check if there's mist, but it has stopped at the ceiling level. Matthew asks for some clothes that he uses to cover the space under the door while Anna contacts Sarah with the walkie-talkie. Now she tells her that the mist has invaded her room, but she's okay because the capsule protects her. Later, both couples go out on the balcony to look at the city, which is now completely covered by the mist, leaving only the rooftops visible. Colette is scared, so her husband comforts her by saying her son is fine and takes her back inside. Later, Anna and Matthew wonder if the mist is toxic and where it came from. Then they see two helicopters passing by. They decide to go back inside before the mist kills them. In the capsule, Sarah observes that the mist is getting thicker around her. Back in the apartment, Lucien and Colette are checking their food while Anna checks the capsule's battery on her phone's app. There are only 4 bars of energy, which means she still has 10 hours of battery. As they chat, Matthew finds some binoculars that he hangs from his shoulder to go out to the balcony. He climbs the wall to reach the roof and uses the binoculars to look further into the city. The fog is truly everywhere. He returns to the balcony to find Lucien trying to use his phone, but there is still no signal. His son lives 2 blocks away from that building on a floor, but he mentions that he is smart, so Lucien is sure that he is safe. Colette then appears saying that they should go visit his son, and Lucien has to remind her about the fog. He has memory problems. They all go back inside, and after his chat with Sarah, Anna asks Matthew what he saw. He says he hasn't seen any rescue teams. Anna is worried about the duration of the capsule battery. Meanwhile, Lucien looks in his closet to find an old radio and takes it to the table. The others take a look. Matthew goes to the hallway to check the fog. He sticks his hand in and nothing happens. He smells his fingers afterward, but there is no odor. He decides to go back inside where they were working on the radio because it doesn't work. Matthew wants to go see Sarah, but Anna says he wouldn't be able to hold his breath outside. Then, Matthew comes up with an idea. He remembers Mr. Belkism and his oxygen tank, which could provide the breathing time needed to get the tank and then visit Sarah freely since she only lives 1 floor below him. Matthew opens the window, receives a hammer and a flashlight from Lucien and some tape from a drawer and leaves after taking a deep breath before entering the fog. When he reaches Mr. Belkism's house, he enters and then breaks the window with the hammer. He starts looking around with the flashlight. First, he finds Mr. Belkism's body on the floor and his search ends fortunately quickly when he finds the oxygen tank. When he hears his wife scream, he looks out the window to tell her they are okay. He grabs a bag to put the tank in and carries it on his back. He hears some noises coming from another room. When he opens it, a puppy runs out and he finds more than 1 note next to the dog's father's body inside. He leaves the apartment and sees Sarah, who is scared. Matthew leaves his food, a flashlight and some batteries for the walkie-talkie, then changes the battery of the capsule. When he finishes, he tells Sarah that he will come to the rescue soon, but he still needs to make the food last. He leaves after promising to return. Instead of going up, he decides to go outside where he finds bodies everywhere in the streets. He starts taking the batteries out of several cars when he hears a whistle and goes to check where it is coming from. He is surprised to find some soldiers in front of a group of survivors, everyone wearing masks. When he asks, the soldier tells him they are taking people to Montmartre, which is a hill that the fog has not reached. He also says that he doesn't know where it comes from or how far it reaches. After giving Matthew one of his masks, the soldier tries to take him with him, but Matthew declines the offer, explaining his family situation and asking for an extra mask. The soldier gives it to him before leaving. Meanwhile, Sarah and Janet talk on the walkie-talkies. Sarah is worried about her dad, and Janet tells her to do her exercises and start guiding her to breathe deeply. When she reaches Matthew, she tells them everything about what she found and informs them that they will have to spend the night there. They also ask Janet if she wants to go see Sarah, but she is against the idea because she would prefer to save the oxygen for an emergency. Here I must say that I am surprised at the composure and the cool head that Janet has to decide not to go see her daughter, which she admire. Later that night, Janet continues to work on the radio while Lucien and Colette ask her about Sarah's illness, remembering the day the family arrived at the building with the big capsule. Meanwhile, Matthew goes back into the hallway once more to check the fog and notices that the fog is rising. He marks the wall in order to keep track. Then, he goes back inside and the elders go to bed. Janet and Matthew realize that services will not return soon and will only worsen from now on. Matthew goes to sleep, but Janet can't, so she decides to visit Sarah, but she finds her asleep. She changes the battery on the capsule before leaving. Later, we see the dream of a girl running in an open field interrupted when Matthew wakes up. In the morning, he finds Janet working on the radio with the tools she brought from her home, and she finally manages to repair the radio. But all the channels are broadcasting the same emergency and repetition recording. Suddenly, they hear an explosive noise from outside, so Matthew and Janet go to the roof to see what is happening. There is a fire in Montmartre. The riots have started. Once they return to the apartment, Anna says they should go to stay at Charlotte's house, who was Sarah's friend, because she lives on a hill and Sarah could share the capsule with her friend. Lucien thinks that Sarah shouldn't leave her capsule, but Matthew explains that there are special suits they can use to move it. They are very expensive, so they don't have one. The suits are in a laboratory in the middle of Paris. Anna tells him it's easy to get lost to get to that place, so she should go, because she has been there before. Matthew decides to go with her to protect her. They first go to Sarah to tell her about their plan and tell her they left the walkie-talkie with Lucien, in case she needs something. Sarah tells them they should go to see how Noah's doing, who lives nearby. A moment later, Matthew and Anna are on the streets and they quickly arrive at Noah's building, but they are unable to enter because an angry dog appears and starts to chase them. They start to run away, and after a few blocks, they accidentally separate because a car was in their way. While they dodge cars, Anna shouts to her husband, who was distracted and ends up falling into the same river. Anna manages to hide behind a car at first, but when she accidentally makes a noise, the dog finds her again and resumes the pursuit. Desperate and scared, Anna gets on a bus and the dog follows her closely, but its leash gets caught on a suitcase, preventing it from moving. Anna takes advantage of the opportunity to escape through a window and run towards the bridge to look at the river and find Matthew, but he is nowhere to be seen. Due to this, he returns to the streets. It turns out that Matthew has swam to some stairs that allow him to get out of the river, while Anna checks the city map. Matthew takes off his wet jacket and puts on a dry one from a random body he found on the street. He also realizes Tataman has a hazardous material suit inside a fallen truck. Meanwhile, Anna finally arrives at the laboratory, and when she is about to enter, she finds Matthew running towards her. After checking on each other, they both enter. Meanwhile, Sarah plays Battleship with Lucien through the walkie-talkie. Inside the laboratory, Matthew and Anna find more bodies and a fire in one of the rooms, but they continue until they find a suitcase with the suit they need. As they leave, a room catches fire again, but this time it explodes, pushing them against the wall. They survive, but Matthew is on fire. Anna looks for a fire extinguisher and uses it to put out the fire. When she looks at her husband, she realizes he's having trouble breathing, and soon they discover the cause. The explosion broke the oxygen tube from his tank. Matthew takes off his mask and Jana starts sharing her own oxygen with him as they climb the stairs to find a room that the fog hasn't invaded yet. Once they arrive, they discover that Matthew has a burn, so while he takes off his jacket and pours a little water on the wound, Anna searches for a first aid kit. She brings it to Matthew and, carefully, bandages the wound while teasing him about his tattoo. When it's time to go, they realize that the tank doesn't have enough oxygen for both of them. Matthew tells Anna to go alone. He'll find an exit on his own, perhaps by jumping over the rooftops. At first Anna refuses, but Matthew reminds her that Sarah needs her and then they say goodbye. Meanwhile, Anna runs through the streets with her suitcase. Matthew makes his way through the rooftops. Anna's tank is running low on oxygen, so she has to take off her mask before entering the building. She manages to hold her breath long enough to make it back to Lucien's place, where she discovers that the explosion has damaged the suitcase and its contents, so they literally did this for nothing. Meanwhile, Matthew finds some supplies and a rope on one of the rooftops. After giving the rope a tug to test it, he climbs up to reach the roof of a parking lot. There he finds more bags of supplies and a blood trail that leads into the body of a police officer. Then, he enters the building and finds a small camp that has an oxygen tank and a rifle. He takes the tank, but when he's about to leave, a police officer appears and tells him that the fog rises faster every hour and asks him to give him the mask. The officer draws his weapon to kill Matthew as he did with the other guy. Matthew puts on the mask and pushes him to the edge of the platform. He falls into a car and they fight. The officer tries to reach his weapon, but Matthew grabs him from behind and takes him by the neck long enough for the fog to affect him. Back in the apartment, Sarah and Jana are chatting through the holes again. Sarah asks if there's anything after death and Anna tells her she believes things can't end here. Anna mentions that she's a scientist, so she can't believe the fog is divine or magical. It must be reaction to something. Their conversation is interrupted when Anna's phone warns her that the capsule battery is running low. Next, Matthew runs through the streets. We see Anna preparing to go change the battery of the capsule, which is dangerous for her, but she has no other choice as there are only 10 minutes. Lucien offers to go by himself as he thinks it's okay if a man of his age doesn't return, but Anna refuses. Afterwards, she has another brief talk with Sarah, or her daughter confesses that she is in love with her friend. Still, Anna runs out of the apartment and reaches Sarah. The battery has already died, but she still manages to change it. Sarah realizes she doesn't have a mask and is worried. She runs out of the room. A moment later, Matthew arrives and Sarah tells him what happened. He doesn't waste time. He goes up the stairs, only to discover that his wife couldn't manage it. Sarah hears him scream in agony and calls him through the walkie-talkie. When he returns to the apartment, he is so emotionally upset that the grandmother offers to talk to him, but he takes the conversation to the balcony to privately tell his daughter the bad news. Some time passes in the apartment when another earthquake shakes Paris. Matthew goes to the balcony and confirms that the fog finally arrived on their floor, so they can't stay. He remembers the suit of hazardous materials he saw on a van and intends to retrieve it to fix Sarah's. He also wants to bring the oxygen for Lucien and his wife, but Lucien rejects it. He and his wife have had a good life and don't want to keep living without their son, so they want to stay in their home and let the fog take them. After offering words of sympathy, Matthew leaves the place and speaks with Sarah. However, she ignores him until he mentions that he has to leave. She gets angry because she thinks she will end up like her mother. but he explains that it is the only option and promises that he will return. Back in the apartment, the elderly couple lies in bed, holding hands and calming each other as they gaze into each other's eyes. They say that they are content with the life they have lived together and then close their eyes as the fog enters their room. Outside, Matthew has no trouble finding the truck with the suit. After retrieving the suit, he starts running back, and on the way he finds a motorcycle with the keys still in it, so he decides to take it. However, when he approaches his building, a boy suddenly appears in front of him, so Matthew abruptly stops to avoid him and crashes. In the capsule, Sarah tries to call him on the walkie-talkie, to no avail, and freezes when someone mysteriously enters her room. On the street, Matthew is slowly recovering and realizes that he has a head wound. He retrieves the suit and walkie-talkie and hobbles on his way back to the building. As he tries to get in touch with his daughter, he barely manages to take a few steps before he has to stop to rest on the ground because the pain is unbearable. But he forces himself to get up when he sees two shadows approaching him. They are Sarah and No, and for the first time since she was born, Matthew finally gets to embrace his daughter. Sarah explains that No came to pick her up because the mist doesn't affect kids like them. Matthew was so happy that he took off his mask for a second so he could kiss Sarah's head as he embraced her. He tells her that he is finally free. Then we see Matthew's dream one last time. This time we clearly see her running through an open field with No and her other friends. Matthew then wakes up, showing us the time has passed and things have changed. Now it is Matthew who stays inside the capsule waiting, while Sarah is outside, taking care of him and getting in touch with the walkie-talkie. And so this story ends. Don't forget to give it a like, subscribe and turn on the bell to not miss the next videos.